you're going to have to do player ID for this as well. So this one is going to have to be 15 times 20. Because maybe players are on separate dialogues. Of course, when you do it like this and store it in here, it means that you will have to write less code if you have multiple libraries or multiple things you want to put in your dialog. On the other hand, it consumes more memory since you have to duplicate the text for each dialog item in here as well, instead of just pulling it straight out of your libraries or whatever. So it's a trade-off. It depends on what you're going for. For most maps, the memory usage won't matter, so I would rather go with this because it's easier to code. It keeps your code more structured. But if memory is a problem for you and you need to use more than the 32,000 something possible variables, or if you're reaching the variable cap, then maybe you have to do some more coding, custom coding. Anyway, back to the clear list items. We're gonna have to take player ID, use the player ID, and add list items. We're gonna also have to take player ID, blah blah blah, here, player ID, player ID, and player ID, and then temp current item. Alright, that was all. Now we have it set up to be per player. Alright, so we're going to update the list for the player. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a player group here and convert the player to the player group, because every single interface function takes a player group and not a player. So this is going to make my life a lot easier. Instead of having this convert player to player group everywhere, I can just use this player group variable. So let's start with just doing a simple display of the list items that we have. So let's do two things. We're going to hide this dialog. And I'm going to create I get sidetracked a lot. I'm going to create a show command here with the player ID, which is going to show the dialog for a player. And all we're going to do, I'm going to copy up this player group, is a dialog, show hide dialog, show our dialog to our player group, and then we're going to call update list. Update list for the player ID. I'm going to do some more data setup right away. Setup test data. Or let's just set up the hero dialog for each integer. I might change this code later, but what the hell. Get total amount of heroes added. Then we're gonna call, we're gonna have to clear the list items first. I'm just gonna do it for player 1 since I'm player 1. And what function was I looking for? One of my own. Add list item for player 1, and the text is gonna be get hero name as text, and the hero ID is gonna be the temp int. Alright, so then finally we just need to call the show on the dialog for player 1. There we go. Basically this little piece of code here, from here, will set up the hero selection dialog and show it to the player. Now we just need to code the update list so that it updates the list properly. So the first thing I'm going to code is a for each integer here. for each button in my list. So for 1, 2, max buttons, I'm going to update the buttons with a text if it has a text. If there is no text set for the button, I am going to hide it, I guess. Yeah, let's hide it. So first off, we need to create a new variable here. Current position, which we set to the current list item. And then I'm going to copy this one up and take selected item. I'm not going to call it temp. Selected item, which we're going to set to selected item for the player. Alright, so we have the current position on the list and what item is selected. As for current position, I am just going to, in the show here, since we don't use a 0 index list and we want to reset it each time the dialog is set. Alright, and then we're going to take the selected item for the player and set it to 0, which is going to be no selection. So 1 is the first list item, since we used our list starts at 1. And 0, when the selected item is set to 0, then no item is selected. So we just set it back to the defaults each time the dialog is shown. I'm going to go through this entire dialog later, so if you're having problems following what I'm doing, I'll go through it again at the end. So don't worry about it. Alright, so we have the selected item for the player here, and we have the current position. So what I'm going to do is it's going to gonna change this one a bit. Take current position. I think I'm gonna rename that thing to current position. Current list position. It's a bit easier to understand what it does. Update list, and we're gonna subtract 1. The reason for this is that each time into this loop, we're gonna use we're gonna increase the current position by 1. And not set, modify variable. You could do this in a different way. There are many ways of doing this. But this way, my current position will always be, should always be correct. So if current position says 1, then we're at the start of the list. It will come to the first button and it will set it to 0 here, and then it will add 1 when it comes to the first button. If you can't quite follow my logic, I'll try to explain it more once I got it working. Yeah, so just trust me for now that this should be correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to check here if we have a value for the button. You could of course write functions for this if you have more advanced. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to check it directly here. So we're going to go here and check for text. Where's text? Oh yeah, you can't compare text. That is a problem, isn't it? No, it's not. So we're going to take the variable current position, and we're going to check that it's less or equal to our settings dialog items current for the player. Alright. And if it's less than, that means that we have an item for this button. If it's more than, it means we don't have an item for this button. So if it's less than, I am going to set the text on the button